if you don't have your partner's support, I'm sorry to say that it's going to be really, really hard for you. You either need to get him or her on board, or you need to think about if that was the right thing, if you got yourself in the right place. And
we're not responsible for any divorces that may happen as a result of this.
Clearly.
Of course.
Clearly not responsible. You should.
Hey guys, welcome to the Business and Bootstrapping Podcast, where we believe in busting your ass and bootstrapping your startup to build the business and life of your dreams. I'm your host, Matt Ward, and if you enjoyed the show today, please check us out at businessandbootstrapping.com to get more great tips, tricks, and interviews with successful entrepreneurs. Thanks, and let's get started. Hey guys, we've got some great news. I'm actually watching the first game of the NBA Finals right now, and it motivated me. I want to give an assist out to everybody who's left a 5-star review, 5-star rating on iTunes, and battled their way through that clunky interface. So first off, we need to have a shout out to C. Norris53, who says 5 stars, great podcast. As someone working an online business that will give me the freedom to travel, it's a great resource for everything I need to know. Subscribed. And next we've got J. Swanson04, which says episode 6, 5 stars. Very interesting. I like the podcast and they post a ton of good questions about small business I hadn't thought of before. The guest on the show, Justin Cook, had great insight. Loved it. And I've got to agree, Justin was an absolutely amazing guest. I'm glad that we got him on the show, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And finally, we have 5 stars from Audrey that says, this podcast is very interesting and insightful. I definitely recommend this podcast to any business major. The podcast contains very authentic interviews, and I'm looking forward to some future shows. So it sounds like she's probably in school, in college, referencing majors. Hopefully she'll get her business off the ground soon. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and now let's get on to the good stuff. Hey guys, welcome to the Business and Bootstrapping Podcast. Today I'm pretty excited to have Brecht Palombo, non-tech SaaS app founder and Bootstrap dad from Bootstrap with Kids on the show to really share his experience and help you guys grow your business, whatever situation you may be in. So thanks so much for coming today, Brecht.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start off with Distressed Pro. I wanted to start off with your SaaS app. You're helping people in the real estate industry. How did you get started with that? Where'd you really begin?
It was kind of a scratching my own itch. I started in real estate in 2000. Let's go back to the beginning. So I started in sales in the 90s, and I started selling computer training and consulting, and then I got involved with one of my best clients from a training company, hired me away. Their .com called Think, THINQ, is going to change the face of learning management and all this. I went and I did that for a while, a couple other startups, and then the .com bust happened. And so I decided I'd go into real estate because obviously real estate never goes down. And, so it was a very safe thing to do. But the idea there was there's all this product around, it's everywhere that you go, and all you need to do is to be able to go out and sell it, which was really attractive to me. So I got into real estate and I started pretty quickly working with a lot of investors and developers. So I would find different warehouses or multifamilies or different things that we could buy, typically convert into condos and do this sort of process. And somewhere around late 2005, early 2006, there's something in the air, like it definitely wasn't going the same way. There was just a lot of froth, I guess. So I saw some things go down where I said, this isn't sustainable. I can't see that this is going on. And so then I turned and I started working for I said, well, where am I going to be? What's going to happen when the shit hits it? Do you swear on this show, man?
It's okay. You can throw it around a little bit. As long as we don't go too hard, I don't think I have to mark it as explicit.
No F-bombs, and I won't bring up the C word, guaranteed.
Sounds good.
So that's where we ended up, was I smelled something coming. It did, in fact, arrive. We had the crash. At the time, I was reasonably positioned for it. I had gotten an auctioneer's license. I had started calling on banks. And what you have to do when there's a lot of banks. At the time, there were a lot more. There were almost 9,000 banks. There's 8,500 or 8,800 banks in the country. But to know which one of them I should be calling on, who has the types of assets that fit into my business, where they would need me to come in and handle liquidations for them. So that was my business. As a bank would have a problem, I'd come in and I'd liquidate assets for them. So they'd have a condo complex or a subdivision or a hotel that they had built, or somebody was in the process of building using their money, and the thing failed, and now they have to collect on it. And that was my job. That's what I did for banks. And so figuring out who had the types of assets that would make my business go, and who worked at the banks and how to get in and how to contact them was the challenge that I was presented with in that particular business. And I figured, if I'm presented with this challenge, if this is the way it's going, because what happens in the downturn is that the lenders, whoever's in the lending position, takes control of all the assets, right? Because as the equity comes down, especially on the commercial side, and the debt doesn't go anywhere, what happens is the possession, ends up changing hands. That's why I got involved with working with the banks. And so what my software does is it helps identify which banks you should be working with, helps you find the individuals who are inside the banks and decision makers. It's like a sales intelligence software, I guess, a really, really niche sales intelligence software. And that's kind of it's a long way to tell you how it all came about.
So you're working in the industry, you're working as a real estate agent or as a broker, and you're finding that all of a sudden you're seeing things are starting to go down, starting to turn into a bit of a perfect storm for the real estate industry. And I think this can apply to a lot of different industries, a lot of different businesses. What are some of the signs that people can look for? If they know something bad is coming, oftentimes a lot of people are going to lose, but there's always that chance to do what you did, to switch, to jump ships, and to get on higher selling tides. When do you know when it's time to jump, and what are some of the things to look for?
Well, froth is definitely one. When money is just too easy, then it creates a bubble. And so when you have really easy money, whether that means it's really inexpensive or it's really easy to get, or it's a combination of those two things, that's gonna push the price of any asset up. But I don't know that that's necessarily going to be helpful for your folks. I think what might be helpful is that I think a lot of times we can get into our routine or our grind, or where we're just kind of doing the work without stepping back to really have a look at what's going on in the grand scheme of things, and getting other opinions around the whole body of our area of work, if you know what I mean. And that's really where you see, when you start seeing dissenting voices on the fringe, and you got to look for clues. I don't know that I have necessarily a prescription for that, but I think if you take your career, or look at your career from the perspective that we have these events, these various industry or economic events occur. It's not quite like clockwork, but it's pretty damn close. It's every 7 to 10 plus or minus years, sometimes more often, and everybody gets complacent in the interim. Things are going great, and it's easy to know the housing market's going up. Well, that's just not the way it goes forever. And I think we as a species forget really quickly about what just happened. And I don't think you can do that. I think you really have to be a student of at least what's going on in your particular industry. But when the whole economy turns, I don't know. I'm not an economist, but I think you need to be prepared for that, especially if you're going to be self-funded. You're going to be out there on your own and responsible for all the dollars you're bringing in. You got to have an ear to the ground to some extent.
So you got to be looking out for those cycles. And then back to Distressed Pro. So you're working on this, and you're seeing this problem, this kind of open space in the industry where there's this information you need, and it's hard to get. People don't know what to do. What do you do at that point when you realize there's a kind of solution, there's something that you can do that would really help you and benefit your business? What's your next step?
Yeah, the way you put it was really nice. It was a lot, it's a lot more hacky than that, the way that I arrived at running that test. But basically, what I did was I put together a really minimum viable product. So I put together, my app relies on a lot of data. So what I did is I went out and manually gathered that data, and I put together just a mail merge into a PDF, and I made this big PDF document that had it had all of the bank records, all of the information that my app has now as an app. It had as individual records in a PDF format report. And I put that up for sale. And then I got some targeted traffic to it and people bought it. And that I called my MVP. So yeah, that was the minimum viable product. It was I don't want to call it a directory. It was a report. It was a paid for report.
So there's all of this hype around the minimum viable product, about really getting something out to market as quickly as possible. When is it a good idea to go for that minimum viable product, and what really makes it viable? How do you get it in the hands of people and really test it? What'd you do?
Well, it's going to solve a problem. If it doesn't solve a problem, then it's not viable. It's just minimum, in my opinion.
I totally agree. With your product, you started to see some traction. You started to get some leverage into the market. That kind of gave you the traction to go where you were going. Can you take us back there on actually selling your product, on kind of the results you initially received?
Yeah. So I feel disingenuous if I don't back up a little bit and just tell you kind of how the whole thing.
Do whatever you got to do.
Okay, so what happened was I was neck deep in real estate. I had a condo conversion project going on, so I had a debt, hundreds of thousands in debt from the project. I had a commercial real estate brokerage that I just opened in the same year that the commercial transaction volume dropped by 93%. So not only was the debt mounting and had I increased my monthly burn rate because I'd opened up this new office, and in addition to that, my income was severely diminished due to the fact that there just were no transactions happening. And so I was working like a bastard and I just had a lot of eggs in the real estate basket. And I said, this sucks. At this time, I have one kid. I have another one in the oven. And so I have one kid who's about a year and a half, and I've got another one coming, and everything is falling.
Everything hits at once.
Yeah. And so I didn't really set out to solve a problem per se. I wish that I could tell you that I had some sort of romantic vision or a passion for fixing the way that a certain thing was done. This was not it, Matt. That is not what I was doing. I was sick and tired of living from transaction to transaction. So I'd make a ton of money on doing a deal, and then you'd got to wait for the next deal. And when those deals stop coming, and it doesn't matter how hard you're working because there's no deals to be had. There's no financing available. The sellers can't sell because they're underwater. Buyers can't buy because they can't get money. It doesn't matter how hard you're working. You're not friggin' making any money. It's not going to happen. And so my whole plan was not to solve any massive problem or save the world. I needed regular monthly recurring income. I mean, bottom line. And I was looking for what I was going to do, what product could I bring or what could I deliver in order to achieve that. So it was definitely selfish and focused on how am I going to generate revenue for me and for my family so we can eat and pay a mortgage and stuff like that. So I don't want to give any romantic visions, I guess. That's what I'm saying about how it came to pass. In terms of how I then started selling, it was a combination of things. It's so cliche to say, but I read the 4-Hour Work Week, I listened to a bunch of podcasts at the time. I was listening to kind of beginner podcasts. So it was like the, what are those guys? They used to be called Sterling and Jay, the Internet Business Mastery guys, and the, you know, these kinds of things was more kind of inspirational, I guess, and or aspirational than anything else. But at the time, that's kind of where I was at. I said, this sucks. My, you know, financial life and business are falling apart. I need to put something in place that's gonna do better than this in a more consistent way. So that is how it all began. That's when I started putting out the PDF and testing other different things. I had a bunch of other ideas that I was toying around with at the time. I landed on this one because I ran the test and I sold from one email blast, cold email blast, I guess you call that spam. It was done through a friend of mine who was on a list, and I sold a number of them. I sold a little over $1,000 worth of that PDF, and I said, all right, well, that seems good enough to me. And that was in late June or early July. I immediately began a development process. I don't know why I did that. If I had to do it all over again, I would have just got really good at selling those PDFs. Instead, what I did was I immediately began building software. I contracted a team from India. I paid very little for it. I think I paid $1,200 or $1,500 for the first version. It took about a month. Maybe it was up to $2,000. And I think I'd paid about the same for my WordPress theme for the site. How I ended up making those calls is beyond me in retrospect. But that's what I did. And then so August 31st, I had a product. It was bad. It was, you know, really clunky, and it was ugly inside, and it was buggy and just pretty bad. It was kind of Franken-app. I had pasted together a few different components to make the thing go, a member management tool, and, you know, a few different things like that. And then I started blogging, and I mean, I definitely would do things differently. But then what I decided was that I needed to communicate with some people, so I booked a couple of speaking gigs. So I had a real estate investment meetup where I went and I talked in front of, I think, 50 or 80 people there, somewhere in that ballpark. And then I had another thing where I booked a time and I went and I spoke in front of a CCIM meeting, which is a certified commercial investment member meeting, and sort of an upper level broker type of meeting. So I did a couple of these sorts of things, and then I had sales, so I had my first sales starting in October of that year.
So you're going through all of this. You're trying to do the marketing and getting it out in front of people. You've got a very minimum viable product, something that works and that you bought. How would you recommend for other people that are going out, they're testing their ideas, they're trying to get it in front of people, they're trying to get that first initial push that you did? What's the best way for people to really kind of test their offer?
I think it really begins, well, there's a couple of things, but I think it starts with a one-to-one communication. And I don't know that means that you need to call people, or there's a variety of ways that you can do it, but it doesn't start with an automated system or an automated funnel or automated anything. I think that it starts by having some real conversations to make sure that you're on the right track, whether those are email or voice. And I think the only way that you're going to do that is for anyone is going to pay attention to you doing that, is if you start to establish yourself as something of an expert and you're starting to provide some kind of value to the community. So in my case, I was doing talks, and I wasn't talking about my product. I was talking about the data. I was talking about what was happening and how this applied to their business, and what some of the outcome might look like. And so it was not a very pitchy thing. At first it was, and probably to a fault, for a long time, I just provided a lot of information, and I either did that in person or I did it on blog posts, or I also started doing it that same year. I started doing podcasts, and those for the real estate side, and those took off pretty well. People really liked hearing from other people who were doing real things. And so I guess that's what I'd say is if you're starting off now, you need to go have real conversations with the people who maybe they're not even necessarily going to be your customers, maybe they're leaders in the space, but you need to talk with folks. And I think you need to provide value, and you need to begin to establish yourself as an expert, and whether that's through blogging or speaking or whatever it is. There's some reason why people should be paying attention to you. Because if you're just running out there with nothing but a landing page and with an opt-in box and a sort of a promise of a headline kind of a thing, that doesn't really cut it for me. It could be that my advice is somewhat specific because I'm talking to you from sort of this real estate platform, but I think that this works in a lot of different niches. So,
what would you advise to people that are interested? They're interested in following the strategies you're taking. They want to get out there and establish themselves as an expert. How do they really go about that? How do they get the confidence to position themselves as an expert, as someone who knows what they're doing? And then what's the best way for them to really connect with customers, connect with audiences? Would you recommend podcasting, blogging, videos? There's so many media formats.
For me, the podcast has been really good. People like hearing your voice. They feel like they know you after a while. So if they listen to you speak now, I've had, more than a couple of dozen folks who I've interviewed on Distress Pros podcast. And so now when I hear from people who have listened to those, they already feel like we have some kind of connection. They trust me. They've heard me ask hard questions and heard me, get real with people, and they know that I'm not BSing them. So for me, I really like the podcast. The other thing, the huge hit for me, was my email mini course. And what that is, it's a 14-part course where I walk you through everything that you need to know in order to do all the things that my software does. But I show you everything you need to know to do those things manually. And what I do with that is, on the very first email that goes out, the very first email says, "Hey, great, you're on the list. Thanks for trusting me with your email. I won't let you down. But I need you to do one thing right now, which is reply to me. Just hit the reply button and tell me why you signed up for this course and what you're trying to accomplish. You should do this for 2 reasons." And then I go through. And I get a huge number of responses to that. And what that lets me do is it gives me both quantitative and qualitative analysis on who's at this point. Of course, if you're just starting off, you're not going to have the kind of volume that I have of the responses coming in, but it lets you engage, because if you actually read the response when it comes in and then you make an actual reply to the person, that's how you start a dialogue. You're going to find out what kind of people are actually looking for your information. Then they're also, as they go through the course, they might reply to you 1 or 2 or 3 more times. And most of the time, what I hope happens for you is that it's going to validate that you do in fact know what you're talking about, or otherwise you're going to find out pretty quickly that you don't. If you have people raising their hand and saying, "Hey, you're going to get real live feedback." So I would propose that if you're just starting off here, figure out something around your subject, around your niche that you can teach, and put together a proper email course where you're going to go ahead and teach that and give away as much as you possibly can and invite a personal response from your subscribers.
I think that's a really smart strategy, and I think that's something that I'm going to try to implement myself as well. I've been working with a lot of blog posts to kind of create the content that would focus around a course, but I think that format of really delivering it to people, of asking for their input, really finding out and interacting with them on a more personal level, is a great way to build your brand for your business and to boost your loyalty. What have you found? I know, actually, let's give listeners a little bit of an idea where Distress Pro is right now. I know we were really talking about where you started out, what the initial stages were when you were struggling, but having some success. Let's give them a little bit of a preview of where you're at now and some of the success that you're seeing with it.
Sure. I mean, it's really kind of in its infancy in my even though I've been out for 5 years. So I started this story that I told you was in 2009. And so that's the August 31st, 2009. That's when I had my first, I went live, I guess we'll say. And so I've been at it 5 years. I went full time in this a year ago, October. So I guess that's 19 months ago. And prior to that, I was really split. I had a couple of different things going on. The selling bank assets business had taken back off. I was making a lot of money doing that. And this started doing well as well, but I really didn't have 100% focus on it. So last year, I've been independent for 19 months. Last year, grossed a little over 150, about 170, and then this year I'm on track. I'm aiming to triple it. Right now, I'm currently on track at about 70% above that in terms of a run rate.
Okay, so you're working on growing, but in the past you had these other irons in the fire, these other ideas you were going for, eggs in your basket. I know when I had Scott on my show, your co-host over at Bootstrapped with Kids, he was talking about some of the ideas you guys had, some of the things you were pursuing, and then you kind of had to have a heart-to-heart and say, I think I should really double down on Distress Pro. I think I can do this. What would you recommend to entrepreneurs? They have these ideas, and they're not sure which to commit to. They're not sure what to focus on or if they should have multiple balls in the arena. What would you say to people based on your experience?
I mean, based on my experience, you should definitely not have multiple balls in the air. It's not helpful. It's too hard. There's not enough time in a week or in a month in order to get traction if you're chasing down multiple things. A man who chases two rabbits catches none. It's just not. There's too much required in the liftoff and the implementation and really making a thing go to try to do two of those at once. I did have a distraction. As soon as I decided I was going to go full-time online, within a couple of months, I hooked up with Scott and through Co-Founders Lab, and we decided to pursue another related opportunity, real estate related app. And at the time, it seemed like a real no-brainer, low-hanging fruit, easy to do. Long story short, about 10 months through it, maybe even more, with a lot of divided time between Distress Pro, which is the thing that was paying all my bills, and CRE Lister, which is the name of the failed app. It was a major distraction. It took a lot of time away, and I did grow by 60% that year, so that was good, but it was in spite of me. It wasn't because I had a focused plan that I was working on and executing. It happened. In spite of me, it happened. Good luck. Yeah, it was just fortuitous. Yeah. So I would really advise against. I hear a lot of people doing this all the time. So on Bootstrapped with Kids, we have people who will email in. And of course, I've gotten to know a lot more people in the micropreneur or solopreneur, community. So many people are trying to start one or two or three things, and I can't really name anyone who's having a big success with an app or anything where they're trying to do two or three of them at a time. If you get it's like Chinese juggling. You heard of Chinese plate juggling?
No.
So you take a plate and you've got a stick. It's about head height. And like a piece of bamboo, and you take a plate and you put the plate on top and you get it spinning, and then you move on to the next one, and the goal is to get a whole bunch of them spinning at once. And once you get one up and get it going, that'll keep going just because of the momentum, because of the force. And it's very much the same way in the business. If you don't have something that's already at cruising speed, that's already at altitude and is paying the bills, to try and take two of them from zero or from basically zero, if it's a couple $100 a month or a few $100 a month is all you're making on the thing, and you're going to try and take two or three of those up to a point where they're going to pay the bills, I think it's crazy, and I don't know anybody who's been successful with it.
Yeah, I've heard the same analogy with e-commerce stores. You could start another one, or you could just grow one store up. But then if you double down on one of them, you're probably going to have 200% of. Basically, it works better.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you're, it's about where you are in your business. I mean, if you take folks like Rob Walling, who's bringing up Drip, and he has Hittail, and he runs startups for the rest of us, and Micropreneur Academy and other things. Probably most of the people listening to this know Rob Walling. He's driving Drip right now and really expanding that. But he's already got the other things that he has are already doing what they're doing. They don't need the same kind of focus and attention in order to be profitable. They're already there. The systems are in place. It's functioning. It's seasoned. And if that's not where you're at and you're trying to do two things, I think you will fail.
Totally agree. So I want to switch over a little bit. You have this experience. You worked in the sales industry. You really focused on getting people to purchase, getting people to convert. What are some of the things that you learned from your days as a salesman and as a realtor that you've taken into your business career now?
Well, I don't like to say realtor, but I'll let it go. So, well, my sales career started with cold calling. I would do a minimum of 100 dials a day and with a minimum of 2 hours of talk time, which was something that was tracked and distributed to the entire sales force every day, everybody's numbers. So getting that sort of competitive edge, I guess, where you're looking at what you're doing for output all the time, I think is a big thing. But if we're talking about sales tactics or strategies or techniques, I don't know that I could impart anything upon anyone in just one podcast for that. That is something that you need to learn by just being in the trenches. In terms of how I sell online, I am very much from the school of direct response copywriting. So before I wrote things online like blog posts and landing pages and this kind of a thing, I wrote advertorials. So I would write an advertorial for this is where you're going through the newspaper, and then there's this eye-catching headline, and you're a couple of paragraphs in before you realize that this is an advertisement for something with a call to action at the end. And so I did things like advertorials and postcards and direct mail sales letter, with handwritten envelopes and this kind of thing. And I think that the fact that the medium's different just because it's digital or it's on a screen versus, something that you're reading in the paper or, that's been sent to you in the mail, the way that you communicate with somebody and the way that you influence somebody to move through your process, that hasn't changed that much. So I think in the beginning, if you can really focus on figuring out how to write solid copy, I don't think that it's something that you, just starting off self-funded, can outsource. I just don't think it's possible because nobody's going to know your market as well as you. They're not going to know what you're trying to communicate. And frankly, if you're just starting off, you can't afford a good copywriter. A good copywriter is not a few $100s for a page or for an article or something. If you're hiring a good sales copywriter, like someone who's going to make people press the buy button, you're going to spend a lot of money and you probably don't have that to start. And so I would really focus on how to deliver your message right out of the gate. And the stuff that I learned from and continue to learn all the time right now, actually Copy Hackers is a great resource, Joe and Weed, but there's a lot of older school stuff that you can go back to. Dan Kennedy is a great example of, he's made a ton of money. He's got a ton of training out there. His transition to online hasn't been that sexy. If you look at the stuff that he's got, it's a little janky out there. But he's got a book called The Ultimate Sales Letter, which is an excellent reference point for someone starting off figuring out how to write a good sales page. So I guess the stuff that came from the real estate space with me more than anything else was that, which was all of the marketing that I did, not necessarily the direct sales, but the marketing that gets the inquiry so you can begin the education process and then the sales process.
And I know from listening to your show, you advocate the 12-step sales page. Can you take us through a little bit of how to get, once kind of based off of what your the experience you had writing ads, the experience you have getting people to convert, how do you put an offer on a page and make it look sexy? How do you get people to press? What are just a couple tips that you have?
Well, so I don't want to say necessarily that I advocate using the 12-step sales letter framework, but what I do advocate using is a proven framework. So there are a number of ways that you can approach this. That is one that works. I guess we can put a link in your show notes, but another simple one is just pain, agitate, solve. I mean, that's it's just basics, So I don't want to say necessarily you have to use the 12-step sales letter, but don't wing it, don't make it up, which is really important. The pattern that you're following should be proven, because it's that I think is probably the biggest mistake that people are making when they first get involved with trying to write good sales copy, is they think they're going to sit down and it's just going to come out. It ends up looking like a college paper or something, which is not sales copy. And so if you're not already familiar with the flow of how sales works and what good sales copy looks like, you really need to figure the structure of it out first. The other thing that I would say is write like you talk, and don't be afraid to have that reflected on the page. People will read through short sentences that are written in a way as though it's just the two of you sitting down and chatting. So if you imagine that you're actually talking to somebody while you're writing your sales letter, it's a huge help. Did you want to go through your letter?
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to do. So guys, Scott is good at this, and I'm pretty new. I think a lot of you guys are probably new as well. So we're going to have Scott run through some of the sales page I have for the branding and about page service I'm offering, and do a before and after case study, kind of show you guys what you can do with your own sales pages, maybe make some improvements. So let's do that.
Cool. So you called me Scott a couple of times, just so you know.
Oh, wow. This is awkward at this point. Okay. We're going to go with Brecht.
No worries, dude. Okay. So it begins with a headline. Okay. If you can't get the sense of what the promise of the page is in the headline, then I think that's your sort of the first failure point for a lot of folks. And after that, you need a logical flow. What I usually do is progress through the problem, then give some proof and some backup on who I am and how I would even be qualified to be speaking about your problem. Get into some case studies or examples or testimonials, and later deliver the solution. And so as I look at your headline, it says boost conversions and customer loyalty. Okay, bad branding holding your business back. So far, there's a lot of different things that these headlines could apply to. I mean, I feel like this is, and I'm not an expert copywriter, but I'm going to give you my feedback and an honest opinion on it. When I look at this, what I want you to do with a headline is position a pain or a problem or speak to me. Did you look at any headline formulas before you put this together, or did you just write this?
I did look at some headline formulas.
Which one?
Apparently, I missed the mark.
Which one is this?
I don't remember. Right now, this was it was kind of like a 2-step one. So drawing them in and then having the rhetorical question. So
at this point, I don't really know what this page is about. You've begun to position that there's some that I can boost conversions and customer loyalty. Bad branding doesn't really mean anything to me. I don't know what that means, and why are you calling my branding bad anyway? Okay. What happens to me after that is that you've got kind of a wall of text. So you've got 7 lines of full width right out of the gate, which I think is just too much for people to get through. They look at it and then they start to scan down the page a little bit more to say, how much does this guy really want me to read? And then when I see that after that, there's another 15 or so, maybe more lines of text, it's immediately daunting. I'll start to do a little bit of a scroll and say, how much of this is he actually going to ask me to read? As I look over on the right, I can see that it's going to be a bunch. And so the whole point of every line in a long form sales letter, which is definitely what you've got going here, the point of every line is just to get somebody to the next line. And so that is all that I would think about. So have you heard of skimmers versus readers? So this is right now what yours is when I'm skimming. Boost conversions, customer loyalty, bad branding holding your business back, brand domination. Are there business benefits? So what now? Boost your branding, my guarantee to you, limited time only. Let's do this.
Too general.
I don't know anything at this point. In terms of what you've communicated to me with these headlines, as I'm reading down, I haven't got anything. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. So we need to be more focused, more deliberate on what exactly we're providing and what some of those real pains are.
Yeah, and I would be able to communicate through your headlines, through your subheads, the exact same message with way less detail as the entire thing communicates. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's a good kind of formula or step through that I think people can use to help boost their conversions.
Keep your sentences and your blocks of text really short. People have no patience for reading anymore. And so if you are not giving them 1 or 2 sentences, maybe 3 lines at the most, then it's too much. If they can't skim it, what I do, I'm kind of a skimmer and reader. So what I do is I land on a page, I skim it to see if it's something that I should invest my time in reading. And then I go back to the top if it is, and then I read through the whole thing. And I think a lot of people operate like that. And so, this all comes back to thinking about what you're doing through the lens of your subscriber or your reader or your user. And so if you do that, I think you'll be in good shape. The other thing that you should do is put Crazy Egg on this or some other mapping software. Do you have anything like that?
I've played around with Crazy Egg on a different site. I will throw it on this one. I didn't even think to do it.
Yeah, it really tells the story. So when I write a sales letter, again, there are a lot of people who are so much better than I am at this. But when I write a sales letter, especially when it's a long form sales letter, I always use Crazy Egg because what I want to see is where people drop off. And so, for example, on a recent test that I had this wall of bullet points. That's the other thing is you don't really have bullet points and that sort of thing on here. We could go over this more in depth another time if you wanted. I don't want to just rip you apart on your
Yeah, don't worry. We can stick with some of the other stuff you're talking about as well.
Where was that? So I had this wall of bullet points, and I thought when I put them down, I said, all right, well, this is good. They're big, they're easy to read, they communicate exactly the different pieces that you get. And what I found out was that people were reading, and it's a long page. I think if you printed it out, it's about like 20 feet tall. And so as they went down, where my big drop off was when you got to it was one full screen of bullets, and it was just way too much. I'd given it too much. And so if you're not using some analytics on and just testing all these things that you're doing, then I think that's a major mistake. You should have any of your analytics tools, your goals, your tracking, all of that set up. If it's on a page where you're looking to achieve a specific result, then you should have your thing fully dialed before you have any traffic to it, so that you can start to see what people are actually doing with it. The other thing that I'd say is you got navigation on top, and I probably would remove your navigation.
I think that's great feedback. I'll make the mistakes and let my audience learn before even having to do it. And I kind of wanted to transition back into your business. So you said there were some regrets that you had, or not really regrets, but things that you would have done differently. You would have sold the PDF. You founded a pretty large SaaS company as a non-technical founder. What are some of the mistakes that you made along your journey that other people looking to get into the SaaS app game should be wary of?
I definitely went too quickly into trying to build a product. with Function. I mean, I should have had the whole thing to do again. I would have started off with doing some free type training, speaking, the email mini course, maybe some blogging, podcasts, this kind of thing. I would have sold the PDF, but I also would have sold, in my particular case, I would have sold training. So a lot of times what I found out is that one of the mistakes that I made is I married my training to the software. And so you signed up and for one price, you got both of these things. And so what I've discovered through some analysis is that what most folks are doing is they're just eating up all of the training that I provide and then not engaging as much with the software. And so over the last 9 months or so, I've been on a mission to really understand who the customers are and to start to break them into different groups and speak to them differently. And I think if you go back and if you're starting at the beginning, what you're going to find out is that if you're communicating with people, you're going to find out that maybe what you're thinking you need to offer them isn't exactly what they're seeking. And you need to be able to have them tell you that. And so I think one of the easiest ways you can do that, and one of the ways you can become an expert, is to start to put out your own training around whatever it is that you're doing. And I'd start with that for free, and then I would develop that into paid training. And I would definitely try to stay away from the software for as long as you can, unless you are now, this is coming from a non-technical co-founder. So if you're a developer out there and you're listening to this, you think I'm crazy. I totally get that. And for some folks, like my friend Jordan Scherer, who's got Minimal Reader, he's just a really competent, technical guy who can put the thing together very quickly and could build traffic around it. And so that worked for him. But I think for a lot of us, I don't know, Matt, are you technical? Are you a developer?
I'm not a developer. I can do some website stuff, and that's
so. For guys like you and I to run out and start building a software product, it's the wrong thing to do. I shouldn't have done that way. I should put out the free mini course. Then I should have probably charged for maybe a membership site for training, sold some training on how to get things done, maybe charge for some webinars, charge for the paid reports, and then move into software after that. That would have been a much smarter way for me to go.
So really build up your list and build it up with what you are physically able to do. You don't need to outsource to make your life a little easier.
That's what I think.
And now, I think the next thing I really wanted to focus on, and we'll only have one question after this. You've been really helpful so far, and I've taken up a ton of your time. But masterminds, the value of masterminds. I've heard you talk about this on your podcasts. I know a lot of people are interested in masterminds. They're interested in getting around other people that are doing similar things. What is the value for yourself personally in terms of getting with other people, finding different strategies? What do you do?
Yeah. I'm in 2 masterminds, and I do what we're calling a stand-up, which is new. And so the 2 masterminds that I'm in we've got 3 and 4 people in those, and we meet every other week. And what those are they're all guys who are similarly independent, who are building or have built software products and who are self-funded. And so we have some accountability in there. We have some strategizing in there, but it's been really important for me. And the challenge is if you're completely solo and you're working in a bunker all the time, is that even if you're getting feedback from your users and you're doing a good job with that, if you don't have anybody who is at your level or right around your level, ideally above your level, who can look at what you're doing and help to bring a critical eye to it and not pull any punches and just call bullshit on you when you need it. And it's a real hard road. This is a hard thing to do alone. In fact, I would say, I don't want to say it's impossible to do alone, but it's really, really hard to do alone because there's so many different things, experiences and nuances and edge cases or whatever across the business. Where when you're pulling from other people's experiences and the experiences of their associates and so on, then you get this huge body of information that you can make your decisions from. And if you don't have that and you're just trying to go through, Googling your way to success, it's really hard to do. So the value to me for having guys who are really solid, who know what they're, and they just all happen to be guys, and nothing against gals, but to have them there every other week where they know my business inside and out. Now, at this point, they know how I work. They know what my challenges are around my market. It's really big. It's a huge impact on my business.
I think that's a really important thing for any entrepreneur to take away, is the importance of more than one head at the table, somebody else who can really help you out.
Yeah.
And you've been amazingly helpful today, Brecht. I want to really thank you. And I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And it's not the typical question that I would ask interviewees. I think this one, it's a little bit more applicable to you as a person.
Okay.
So you've got a family, you've got kids.
I do.
You're launching your own business. What advice do you have for other parents out there, other people that have family to support and other commitments to deal with? How do you deal with that? And I know you could probably go on all day, but what are a couple of pieces of advice that you could give to prospective entrepreneurial parents out there? They're bootstrapped with kids.
Sure. Well, the truth of it is that this first piece of advice I'm going to give you is something where if you already have kids and a wife, there's nothing you can do about it, but it starts with picking the right partner. So my wife knew that I take risks and I, thrive on like the achieving, milestones and certain deals and making it happen. And that she knows that I'm not built for just sort of toeing the line and working in a queue. And so she knew that to begin with. And so if you don't have your partner's support, I'm sorry to say that it's going to be really, really hard for you. You either need to get him or her on board, or you need to think about if that was the right thing, if you got yourself in the right place.
And where we're not responsible for any divorces that may happen as a result of this.
Clearly not responsible. You should seek counsel. I mean, here's the thing, is that it's not possible to do without spousal support, because there are going to be times where, we ate shit when the market crashed, when the real estate market crashed. We ate shit so hard, Matt, I can't even tell you. It was a fucking nightmare. Not to mince words. You can beep that out if you need to. But with, 1.5 kids at the time. And so if I didn't have her support, if she didn't believe in me, if she didn't know that I was doing everything that I could in order to get through that to the next step, we wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have made it. I would have had to go get a job or something, and the whole thing would have failed. So you need to be prepared that you might take it on the chin. I hope that you don't, but you need to be in a place where you accept that there are risks. And the way that I like to do that is I look at the absolute worst case scenario on things. So, if everything went completely to hell, well, what does that really mean exactly? How bad is that really? Sacagawea, Sacagawea?
Of course.
It's a burlap sack in the wilderness, with the baby in a river. It's not that bad. We're not going to have that. What are you going to have to do? Maybe you might have to rely on some friends or some family, for a short time if things go really, really south. But you need to be prepared for that. And I think you need to look at it and you need to say, is this something that I can do? Is that something that we can really handle? Because if it's not, then you're never going to go all in and you're just going to dabble and it's just going to be a hobby. Then you're probably not going that far. Now, there are guys who have done it completely part-time on the side and built it up, and that is awesome. But, I think for anybody who's really an entrepreneur and who's going to go out and who's going to get involved in a number of things, not every single thing you ever do is going to work out all of the time. You need to do your best to prepare for that, especially considering whatever obligations you have. But you need to accept that those things happen. You need to be with somebody who's going to allow you to make those mistakes. And I think what that means for me, right? So you're right. We don't want to be responsible for any divorces. But the way that works in our relationship is that my wife knows that I am busting my ass and that I am, anything that I'm doing for the family. So I'm not saying that I'm doing one thing and then I'm just kind of f***ing around on Facebook or, surfing the web or whatever. Like I produce. So if you're actually going to do it, and then you need to show up and you need to produce, and that proves that you can do it. I guess that's the best advice I have for that. Kind of went on with it for a bit.
I think that's really amazing advice and really something people should hear. And you've been super helpful today, Brecht. I think you've given people insight into a lot of different aspects of entrepreneurship. If people want to reach out to you, they want to say hey, or just really thank you for being awesome, where's the best place for them to come and do it?
You can tweet at me, Brechtify, BRECHTIFY, or you find me over at bootstrappedwithkids.com. You can also subscribe over at brechtpalombo.com, BRECHTPALOMBO.com. And I've got a mailing list there where I occasionally mail. I know it went off the rails a couple of times with you, man. I hope it's okay. I hope this was useful.
It's okay. If you're always on the rails, then it's kind of boring. And guys, I can personally vouch for Bootstrapped with Kids. It's a great podcast. And Brecht, I heard today we're only accepting 5-star reviews.
So this week only, the Business and Bootstrapping podcast is accepting 5-star reviews. Here's what we can guarantee. If you will come back, if you will fight your way through the iTunes interface, if you will get in there and you will leave a 5-star review, I can 100% guarantee you that Matt will be back here to please you again with episode 18 and 19 and 20. And if you don't, can't necessarily say what's going to happen, but I know that it probably won't be good.
Oh, God, that was priceless. Thanks so much, Brecht. Thanks for being on the show. You've been a great guest. Guys, I just want to say thanks for tuning in to another episode of the B&B podcast. I hope you really enjoyed the interview today and got something that's really going to transform your business. If you're interested in getting more interviews like these and some other bootstrap business and branding advice, you can head on over to businessandbootstrapping.com to check out our blog. If you want more, be sure to subscribe and get our free productivity guide with 7 useful strategies to help you when growing your business. And hope to see you guys again soon. And of course, as always, if you guys enjoyed the episode and you want to be freaking awesome, would love a 5-star review in iTunes if you can take the time. Thanks so much, guys.